My dad once told me a story about one of his cousins. The cousin used to live with his family, wife and daughter, in an apartment building. On the floor above them lived an old widowed woman whose young son, around 24-25, served in the Indian Army and had died during a bomb attack somewhere in North India. A few weeks after the funeral, my uncle started having dreams about the son who had died. He would tell my dad and his mom that the son keeps knocking on his door in the dream and just stands there once the door is opened. He had the same dream for 2 weeks straight, until one night before dinner, he opened his front door to go down to the lobby and saw the son standing in front of him. He quickly shut the door, freaked out for a few minutes behind the door, and opened it again to find the son still standing there. I'm not sure what happened right after, but my uncle then started seeing the son inside his apartment, and then it just stopped. He didn't see the son anymore. Maybe it actually happened, or it was the psychological aftermath of overthinking about a death. It creeped me out regardless.
When I was 17, I went to my mate's house for some beers for his birthday. I probably only had about 5 drinks. Come the early hours of the morning, probably around 2, 3 a.m., I head out to the kitchen for a drink. I pour a drink of water and turn around and take a sip. And as I'm swallowing, I swear I hear footsteps. The ground in the entire room is all made up of tiles. So I hold my drink down and listen for a few seconds. Next thing I know, I hear fast footsteps in front of me running towards me. And suddenly, a huge cold breeze blew right through me. At that point, I just freaked out and ran back for the bedroom. I ended up waking my friend up and telling him what happened, and we listened and could hear odd bangs and bumps from out there. But nothing out of the ordinary after that ever happened. I'll still always remember it though. Gives me goosebumps writing this.
This one isn't necessarily scary, but definitely paranormal. I was 14 and sitting by myself in my living room playing some Halo, when I noticed that the room around me seemed oddly quiet. I paused the game and tried to listen for the difference. It was strange. My house is over 100 years old, and usually there's an odd creak audible from somewhere nearby. Not now though, it was dead quiet. I felt strange, but not threatened. There was nothing sinister about the silence. I sat for a few more minutes just listening. It almost felt peaceful actually. Then suddenly I felt a hand on my shoulder, very lightly and briefly. But even today, I still remember the distinct feeling of a hand on my shoulder. It didn't scare me, nor did I jump up in surprise. I actually felt a familiar presence, like family. I mentioned the experience to my mom, and she told me she'd experienced the same thing, only one room over. She says she felt her father's presence with the hand. Pretty cool.
Our SCBU was known to be haunted. There was a dark shadow that was rumored to be a midwife that we'd be told to ignore if we saw her on night shifts. And one of the incubators would go off at night, or repeatedly show patient observations at the nursing desk when there was no baby in there. I've also worked in a psych rehab hospital for children that used to be a war hospital. We had a parent call to check on their kid overnight, only to be told by the terrified kid the next morning the parent in question had passed away years ago. Multiple staff spoke to the parent. Just remembered. We have a stairwell above the mortuary I was recording a voice note in recently, and there were straight-up voices in the background talking. I was on my own, and it was silent in there at the time.
I don't believe in ghosts, so this is definitely just exhaustion or sleep deprivation on nights, mistaken identity. But it spooked me at the time. I had a patient who had new onset abdominal pain but was otherwise relatively well in himself. Lots of comorbidities, though. He'd been handed over by the day team as going for a CT scan overnight. I'd popped in after handover, said hello, checked he wasn't any worse, had a nice chat, etc. Later that night, he passed me in the corridor and waved at me and said he'd see me soon. An hour or so later, I got an arrest call to that ward, same patient. During the arrest, I suggested I go look at the CT scan in case it was helpful, only to be told by the nurses that he hadn't gone for it yet, and hadn't left the ward since the start of my shift. As I said, it was night 4, I was knackered. I almost certainly mixed up patients or created a false memory, etc. And he was a lovely patient. The arrest was quite traumatic, so maybe my brain wanted to remember him being comfortable. But I can visualize him in that corridor so clearly.
When I was a new RN on a stroke unit, I was preparing a bed for an admission while watching news on the patient room TV with another nurse. He had stepped out to make a phone call while I finished preparing the bed. On my way out, I passed the bathroom whose door was open, and out of the corner of my eye I saw someone standing near the sink mirror. Thinking it was my co-worker, I backpedaled to peek in and see what he was doing, and no one was there. I was so spooked I was afraid to mention it, Then one night some old school nurses were talking about parts of the old hospital and creepy occurrences. One nurse mentioned seeing the lady in white, in which a whole conversation started with them about how she's been moving about lately. I had never told anyone my story until that night, and what creeps me out more is she is often seen in bathrooms, and water has been turned on the sink without any patient in the room. That's just one spooky occurrence I had at my hospital. I have had a few more too more recently.